The first clue came in the middle of July, a blistering heat wave that had everyone's lips cracked and lawns turning into brittle straw. I walked into my kitchen one evening, turned on the faucet, and instead of the steady gush I'd relied on for years, the water sputtered out in weak coughs before dying altogether. First, I thought it was a city issue. Maybe a broken pipe down the road, maybe a summer shortage. But when I stepped outside into the suffocating night air, I heard a distant hiss of water rushing somewhere it shouldn't be. It was faint but distinct, and as I followed the sound past my fence line, my stomach tightened like a clenched fist. The trail of damp earth led straight to my neighbor's backyard. Karen Sterling, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, lived there. Obese, domineering, her arms always folded across her chest as if daring the world to challenge her authority. She was infamous for terrorizing the neighborhood with fines and citations. She once demanded a veteran remove his flagpole because it was too tall. Another time she threatened a young couple over their garden, calling it a weed infestation. People whispered about her in grocery store aisles and prayed not to cross her path. Yet here I was, standing on the edge of her property, staring through the slats of her fence as water gushed with obscene abundance into her pool, shimmering under the moonlight like a stolen treasure. The next morning, my suspicions were confirmed. I dug near my own meter box and found the evidence glaring back at Mimi waterline had been severed and rerouted with a crude but effective PVC splice that funneled it directly into Karen's system. She had stolen my water, siphoning it to fill her massive pool while I went dry. My fists shook with rage as I snapped photos, every detail etched into my phone's camera roll. She didn't just rob mesh, mocked the whole neighborhood during a drought, all while crowing about community standards. When I confronted her that afternoon, she met me in her driveway, her face glistening with sweat and smugness. "You should thank me," she sneered, waving her thick hand toward her glittering pool. "At least your water is being put to good use." The board approved this redirection. Community resources must serve the community. Community. I spat the word out like poison. This is theft, Karen. You cut into my property, you rerouted my line, and you're drowning in luxury while people can't wash their dishes. Her smirk widened, the flesh around her jaw trembling as she laughed. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just one man. I'm the president of this association. Judges, inspectors, they all listen to me. Pay your dues, keep your mouth shut, and maybe I'll let you have your water back." That was the breaking point. I'd faced her arrogance before, but this was outright criminal. That night, under the cover of darkness, I set my plan into motion. I borrowed a portable chiller unit from a friend who worked in commercial refrigeration. With some rigging, ductwork, and a lot of determination, I connected it to the spliced pipe feeding her pool. By 2 a.m, the humming unit was pumping frigid air and liquid nitrogen coolant through the water line. I watched from my backyard as mist curled into the summer night, frost creeping like white veins across the stolen pipe. By 4 a.m., Karen's pool, her symbol of dominance, was an Arctic slab. The once shimmering blue oasis was frozen solid, ice glinting under the faint glow of her yard lights. When the sun rose, the neighborhood gathered. Word had spread quickly after weeks of Karen bragging about her exclusive pool access. Families wandered down the street, children tugging at their parents' hands, and all eyes fell on the sight of Karen standing barefoot in her robe, shrieking at a block of ice where her pool used to be. Her face turned a furious shade of crimson, sweat mixing with tears as she screamed about vandalism, about sabotage, about how she would have me jailed. But this time, the crowd wasn't on her side. They laughed. They clapped. They took videos that flew across social media faster than Karen could dial 911. The twist came when one of the neighbors, Mr. DeVries, a quiet man in his 70s, stepped forward holding a folder. He revealed that he had once been a city water inspector and still had access to municipal maps. Karen's rerouting wasn't just theft from might violated city water codes and endangered the whole block by destabilizing pressure systems. If the pipes had burst, entire streets could have flooded or collapsed. His testimony, combined with my photos, made the case airtight. By the time police showed up, Karen had lost her voice from screaming. They examined the frozen pipes, shook their heads, and then placed her in handcuffs. The sight was surreal. The same woman who wielded power like a club now being hauled away past a crowd of neighbors who no longer feared her. Some even jeered, chanting "Ice Queen," as the squad car pulled away. I stood there, exhausted but vindicated, as the ice began to melt under the rising sun, dripping into the soil like the last remnants of Karen's reign. For years she had bullied, extorted, and controlled, but in one night her empire crumbled under the weight of her own greed. The aftermath was swift. The HOA board was restructured, fines were audited, and a new charter was written ensuring no president could ever act unilaterally again. Karen faced charges for theft, property damage, and tampering with city infrastructure. She tried to pin it on me, but the mountain of evidence was impossible to bury. Her downfall was sealed not by a courtroom speech, but by a frozen monument to her arrogance. Now, whenever neighbors walk past the empty shell of her pool, they smile. It stands as a reminder that no one, no matter how loud or intimidating, is above the truth. I didn't just freeze her water, I froze her tyranny in its tracks. The fallout from that morning didn't end with Karen screaming in her driveway. If anything, that was just the opening act. By noon, the videos had made their rounds online. Clips of Karen, in her oversized robe, yelling at a sheet of ice while neighbors giggled in the background, were being shared across town. Some clever teenager even set the footage to music, calling it Karen versus the Arctic, and within hours it had 500,000 views. The more she tried to shout her innocence, the more foolish she looked. But behind the laughter was something heavier. People finally began talking about what Karen had been doing for years. An elderly widow named Mrs. Collins came to me that evening, clutching a yellowing stack of letters. She whispered, almost ashamed, that Karen had been charging her special assessment dues. For over a decade money she could barely afford, threatening foreclosure if she didn't pay. A single father named Jamal revealed that Karen had shut off his access to the community playground, claiming his kids were too rowdy, unless he coughed up an extra monthly fee. The stories tumbled out like floodwater breaching a dam. It wasn't just me she stole from, it was everyone. That night I called another meeting in my barn. Just like the time we had gathered to fight the fake dues, the room filled with nervous but determined neighbors. The air smelled of hay and sweat, but also of something else. Momentum. I laid out the photos, the frozen pool, the broken water line, and then passed around Mrs. Collins's letters. People gasped, some cursed, some simply shook their heads in disbelief. Then Jamal spoke up, his voice cracking with anger. She's been bleeding us dry while laughing in our faces. We've all been scared of her clipboard and her fake authority. But it's over now. We've got her. The turning point came when Renee, my attorney, stepped into the barn carrying a thick manila folder. She had filed an injunction with the county that morning. "This isn't just HOA abuse," she said, her voice echoing with steel. "This is criminal fraud, extortion, and theft of public utilities. The city water board is already involved. The district attorney's office will be next." She laid down her evidence. City maps, property deeds, testimonies from multiple neighbors. It was a mountain no one could climb over, least of all Karen. Still, Karen wasn't one to go quietly. The very next day, she called a press conference on the steps of the HOA clubhouse. Dressed in her finest navy blazer, her hair lacquered with enough spray to withstand a hurricane, she barked at cameras about slander and sabotage. She accused me of vandalizing her pool and leading a coup against lawful authority. But the reporters weren't buying it. One by one, they asked about the rerouted water line, about the frozen pipes, about Mrs. Collins's letters. The more she dodged, the more obvious her guilt became. By the end of the conference, even her most loyal lackeys were slipping away, their faces pale with embarrassment. And then came the twist no one expected. A man named Victor, tall and sharp-eyed, showed up at my door one evening carrying a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as a former accountant for the HOA. His voice trembled as he explained how Karen had manipulated the books for years, funneling funds into private accounts, covering her tracks with fake maintenance invoices. "She made me sign off on it," he confessed, his hands shaking. But I kept copies just in case. I couldn't live with it anymore. Inside his briefcase were bank statements, receipts, and hidden ledgers. It was the final nail in her coffin. When Renee saw the documents, her jaw actually dropped. "This is Rico territory," she muttered. "She's not just going down for theft, this is organized fraud. The feds are going to love this." The day of the court hearing felt like a scene from a movie. The courthouse was packed, neighbors, reporters, even curious strangers who had followed the viral videos. Karen strutted in, still trying to project her old arrogance. But it was hollow. She sweated through her blouse before the proceedings even began. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, claiming the rerouted water line was a misunderstanding, the frozen pool an act of malice. But then Renee rose, sharp and unflinching, and laid out everything. The photos, the letters, the maps, Victor's ledgers, testimonies from Mrs. Collins and Jamal. And finally, the viral footage of Karen shrieking at a block of ice. The jury didn't even look at her when the verdict was read. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, theft, and extortion. The judge ordered a full federal investigation into her finances. Karen's face, once so smug and inflated with power, collapsed into something pitiful. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted, but there was no escape left. She was led out in handcuffs as the crowd outside roared with cheers and applause. The HOA was dismantled soon after. A new association was formed, this time with clear checks and balances, community oversight, and elected leaders who actually served the neighborhood instead of terrorizing it. The stolen money Karen had taken was partially recovered and redistributed to those she had wronged. For the first time in years, people felt free to plant gardens, to fly flags, to live without fear of a clipboard-wielding tyrant. As for me, I never forgot the night I froze Karen's pool. Not because of the revenge, but because it symbolized something greater, that no matter how powerful bullies seem, their empire is always built on cracks. One push, one act of defiance, and the whole thing can shatter. Sometimes I still walk past her old house, now sold off to a quiet young couple. The pool has been drained, its icy infamy long gone, replaced with a modest garden. But the legend lives on. Kids still whisper about the night the pool turned to ice. Neighbors still smile when they see me, some even calling me the Iceman as a joke. And every time I just laugh, grateful we stood up together. Karen's reign ended not with a gavel, but with frost under the moonlight. And that frozen pool? It wasn't just her downfall, it was our liberation. So I'll ask you, reader, when someone tries to steal what's yours, when they reroute your lifeline into their own greed, do you let it drain away or do you freeze it solid?